inspired flesh from strange playgrounds. It shifted beneath my fingers, fractures coruscating its once pristine surface. Too much to bear, my body incapable of tears after so much hurt, so much lost. And for what? Slow death in dry, dead sand. All that was left of meaning in this wasted world. It'd be worth it in the end, they all said. A prize worth any sacrifice. And oh, how much we'd sacrificed. For those like Regina, constant abnegation had become an end in itself, a fetishistic form of spiritual cleansing, like the Catholic ritual of confession. Most of them had gone the way of the laity in the final experiment, just more handfuls of dust to add to the wastes and mountains. I was the last, alone as it was possible for man to be. No angels at the end, no rising up of the dead or descent of deities from on high, only the light and music I could barely recall. Everything unravelled before my eyes, as if reality was a tapestry whose weave was being unpicked. I saw it all, every particular. They were supposed to be protected, like me, but the wards were weak or imperfect. Angela, writhing so violently on the floorboards, her back snapped, worms of light unsewing her from the groin out. Thomas, hoisted into the air by invisible hooks, dancing as he shed himself. Then the maelstrom. A storm that ripped me from the world, tossing me up on winds that alternately shrieked and whispered in my ear, lies, poetry, and revelation, all pouring into my mind as the world that made them went to nothing. I woke, buried beneath a quilt of sand, the prize we'd murdered the world for, clutched so tight its thorns pricked my flesh. A configuration of crystal, like the shell of some exotic deep-sea life, threads and filaments of light running like veins throughout. Along its scalpel-sharp edges, small rainbows erupted, casting their colours upon my torn and tattered skin. The wards hadn't been nearly enough. I was hurt, bleeding from my head, my side, my back, dying. The last worthless scrap of humanity. Ironic that it should be the one who'd murdered the rest. Nothing left. The rumours we'd hung our hopes on proven false. No salvation, no renaissance or grand transcendence for our species. Only this, silence in sand and blood, and a man lamenting genocide. I could swallow sand until I choked to death, lie down and wait for bloodlust to claim me. Neither option particularly appealed. Too much time for thought and regret. Only one remaining. Stripping out of the tatters of my shirt, wincing as the fabric scraped across wounds, I looked down at myself, despairing. The device would likely shatter before it could do me terminal harm, but with any luck, there'd still be enough power in it to reduce me to the same waste that crunched and shifted underfoot. Pain wasn't anything new to me. I'd sacrificed toes and fingers in the name of transcendence, an eye, a testicle. All of them ritually rather than surgically removed, agony and the possibility of death essential components of the annealing process. Those prepared to give all that they are will win the world. Stratham's words, as meaningless as the wind that carried his ashes now. The first cut, thorns of crystal slicing barely a centimetre into my breast, caused me to double over in agony, vomit splashing the sand. Thought left me for a time, consciousness shattering, leaving only an echo of the maelstrom that brought me here. When it finally returned, night had fallen, the desert skies swarming with shoals of living lightning. My body was burned where the crystal scored me, the flesh that shielded my heart reduced to seeping black filth, the hide of something long dead. I watched from the top of my dune as the lightning things arced down from the sky, seething and squirming as they burrowed into the sand, stirring it into bizarre rose configurations that remained long after their makers dissipated. So, this was the New Eden, the promised paradise for which we'd murdered humanity, a desert garden, sterile flowers coaxed from the stuff of the dead. I didn't allow myself time for hesitation. Before I could think, before I could take my next breath, I plunged the device into the softened flesh it had already pierced. My body became a reservoir for fire and frost, cold burning threads uncoiling throughout my marrow, my arteries, twining themselves around my nerves like glittering thread, lending luster to an otherwise mundane weave. I felt myself unpicked, nerve by nerve, cell by cell, thought and memory sluicing away until there was nothing but a mote of screaming consciousness, unwanting being spitted and sustained beyond nature and reason. I was pain, woven from it, the first stitches of a new universe whose stuff would be suffering, for suffering was all I had retained from my former existence, the loss and the fury and the sorrow. No, there was more here, exponentially more, not lost, merely fragmented, the accrued components of self separated and scattered, waiting to be rearranged into more fitting configuration. Revelation brought an abrupt end to suffering, eyes so raw they might have been freshly formed or ancient beyond comprehension, opening on a world in flower. I saw myself from multiple angles, the body to which I was once confined swelling and erupting with crystalline growths, a fast-growing tree among the desert sands, an echo of old symbolism, the tree more in me than in the world, though that distinction meant less and less with every breath. It was a promise of what might be, the heart of a new Eden. It sap my blood and blooms my flesh, waiting for the time when they might ripen to dreaming fruit. And all around the desert, sands burgeoned and shifted, the tree's roots proliferating faster than the light it caught from the dying sun. So deep I tasted the earth's iron heart. There were things that escaped the apocalypse we'd wrought down there. Caverns vast as the greatest cities of man, where blind maggot monstrosities swarmed and bred beyond sight or knowledge of any former species. Watching them hunt and feed in the dark, mating in the unlovely pools of sludge that were their young's nurseries, I sensed a time, many, many centuries from now, when they would emerge into the sunlight, evolved beyond their current disgrace thanks to their feeding from the growths and flowers that currently invaded their subterranean realm. Were these the children that would inherit this new earth? Perhaps. There'd be others, too. Though humanity and all that sustained it had been reduced to dust, I felt a lingering residue of potential, echoes of dreams threading the air, desires carried on the breeze, scattered like pollen across the shifting plains. Soon they would take root and flower just as I had, life born of its own impetus and intention, inspired flesh, sitting changeable and uncertain on the bone. That was the dream we'd murdered the world for. This chance. A renaissance that would put all prior rebirths and revolutions to shame. Now there was nothing but time. Time in which to watch this new world flourish, feel my own flesh thread throughout, becoming its warp and weft. I expanded, mind and matter as one, reaching depths and heights I never could have conceived, caged inside my own skull. Thomas, Regina, even Stratham, they were all here, in the dust and the memory, waiting for the time when they might cohere themselves and be reborn. I could sense them dreaming with concentration. Regina sprawled upon the chalk-white sands of an endless beach, pale twins, one male, one female, lapping at her toes. Stratham sealed away somewhere dark and subterranean, laughing and crying as he waited for the beasts that prowled there to descend. And mingled amongst them the fantasies of less familiar souls, a barely pubescent girl shedding her skin to reveal an interior of mist-winged butterflies, a boy who wandered a citadel of ice, its fluted spires and bastions resembling vast shells and coral reefs, atop which flocks of winged men and women perched, singing for him to come join them, though he lacked the anatomy to answer. Each dream, each particle of sand, a potential world, a universe. That was what the key was for, to unlock the door, sealing the actual from the imagined, allowing humanity to dream itself anew and learn a host of new sins where the old had grown weary. I laughed at the prophecies that infested my thoughts, laughed as the last of my humanity leached away, leaving in its wake something new and nameless, waiting for others to inform it of its nature. Dissolving, dispersing, I turned multiple eyes heavenwards, saw stars blinking through the waning tempest, and wondered how many worlds out there had experienced similar revelation. How many species had come so close to destruction and clawed their way back? Maybe we'd know someday, maybe not. For now, this place, this new Eden, contained wonders enough. Thank Christ for second chances.